Hello and welcome to Psychology in Seattle. I'm your host, Kirk Honda, licensed therapist and professor. Today on the podcast, I have two very special guests with me. They were students in a course I taught last quarter. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for having me.
I thought I would have them on the podcast to talk about their experience of their first quarter in graduate school as they train to become therapists. I know a lot of our listeners out there are in graduate school or thinking about becoming a therapist, or they are a therapist, or they're a cat that just decides to meow and when I stop talking and interrupts me. But I thought we would start by asking you where you're from, what do you do for fun? Give us some background about your life so that listeners can get to know you a little bit.
I am from Indiana. I had to get the hell away from there.
Yeah. Small town Indiana, right?
Small town Indiana. I lived in the country.
Smaller than Pawnee.
There were 500 people, I think, in my town. So very, very small.
Yeah.
So coming to Seattle was kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. So when I think of a small town, 500-person town in Indiana, I think corn.
Lots of it.
Okay.
Soybeans.
Okay. Soybeans.
Tractors. Lots of country folk. A.K.A. rednecks.
A.K.A. rednecks. And it's interesting because when you think rednecks, you think Alabama, Georgia. You don't think Indiana. But
Midwest, yeah.
But if you've ever driven across the United States, the vast majority, 99% of the square mileage of the United States is rural.
Yes.
And it's funny because in Washington State, north of Seattle, which is almost in Canada, you'll find that people have a southern accent sometimes.
That's what always blew my mind about people from Indiana. It's because, like, I don't think I have a southern accent, but, like, I've met people from Indiana who just aren't, or like, born and bred in Indiana who have a thick southern accent.
Yeah, what is that?
I think they just want to have one.
Yeah, I think it's because they just identify, right? So anyway, all right. So you're from Indiana, small town. Harry, what about you? Where are you from?
From Connecticut.
Connecticut?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Not too far outside of New York City.
Yeah.
So
okay.
From a pretty large town, 100,000 plus.
Oh, okay.
So city, I guess.
Yeah. What's Connecticut like?
Lots of wasps.
Wasps?
Yeah.
Oh, wasps. Right.
not like the insect, but
That's exactly what I thought.
Lots of upper class. I mean, there's pockets of like urban life, I guess, but really it's just lots of rich, old-timey families.
Oh, really?
Yeah. The area that I'm from is surrounded by, I believe, 3 of the top 25 richest cities in the country.
Really?
Yeah.
So is it like Bellevue, Kirkland, Washington?
No, it's not like any place I've seen in Washington so far.
Really?
Yeah, it's
like
just very unique to the Northeast.
Richer, more snooty?
Yeah, richer, but not like tech money.
Oh.
Like old-time family inheritance money.
Old
That's
money.
just been, like old money, like wasps. So lots of old money.
Snooty money?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, lots of I'm better than you money.
Wow. So you guys pretty much came from the exact same background.
Right, that's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah. All right. Well, what do you do for fun? Give us a sampling of your personality here.
I like to write really long papers and read about psychology 24/7.
And then on Facebook, post memes with exclamations of how much pain I'm putting you through as your teacher.
I consider myself a meme wizard.
Yeah.
So,
well, along those lines, wizard, you play Dungeons and Dragons like me.
not way back in the day. I stopped probably about a year ago.
A year ago?
Yeah.
Okay.
3 days ago.
What about you, Harry? What do you do for fun?
Reading, video games, and trying new beer.
Trying new beer?
My 3 passions, I guess.
What's your favorite new beer?
I've been trying just lots of craft stuff, so a lot from the Fremont Brewery currently.
Okay.
But I like their winter ale.
Okay.
It's pretty good. Their 12th, there's another brewery I just tried. The name is escaping me right now.
Do you like those really tasty beers from Seattle that just have a lot of girth to it, using a word that was mentioned earlier?
As long as they're not dark, like stout beers. I do like beers that have like a fruity ending.
Oh, what video games do you like to play?
Mostly role-playing.
Yeah?
Ni no Kuni is my current game that I'm playing.
What's that?
It's a Japanese RPG
Oh.
animated by Studio Ghibli.
Is it
You're
like,
familiar with
oh,
them?
really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Yeah.
They have a new movie coming out. I think it's his last movie, about a guy who designs the Zero for World War II, the airplane. Anyway. All right. Well, why did you guys choose to become a therapist? Tell us, why would you subject yourself to so much pain?
I don't know. I take it all back. Harry, you go first.
When I did my undergrad at University of Connecticut, I wanted to go into therapy and counseling initially, but I didn't like I don't want to say the education I got there. I didn't get interested enough in the professors and what they were teaching, so I kind of just moseyed along through the program, and then left for 5 years and did some nonprofit work with kids in middle schools. And then when I came out here to the West Coast with my current wife, I was just looking for a job and found a job at Antioch, and then doing admissions for the School of Psychology and talking with faculty and then talking with students who were interested in the program, I kind of got reinvigorated in wanting to become a therapist again. I always wanted to work with couples, not so much the family system as a whole with kids and everything, but I was drawn to working with couples, married and unmarried, so it just made sense, considering I was already here at the university and I liked the faculty and I liked the type of students that came into the program. It made sense for me to just join the program and kind of start the path that I'd put off for a while.
Interesting. Did you have other careers that you were considering?
No, I mean, I thought about going into education, working with kids, but after doing it for a couple of years and working with middle school kids, I realized that I just really don't like working with kids that much, at least in that authoritative professor or teacher relationship. So I was like, I can't be a teacher. I would go insane.
Yeah, that was the career I thought about 2 minutes before I decided to become a therapist. I imagined what it would be like to have to corral and discipline and get half your students just looking at you with boredom. And my cat will just try to destroy. This is the cat that tries to destroy people.
Yeah, he put me in check. He bit my thumb.
Yeah. That's what he does when he loves somebody. So,
Ow.
Yeah. So one of your thoughts early on in your undergrad was to become a counselor working with couples and individuals.
Yeah, I like working with people and meeting people and just experiencing the dynamic of relationships. So it just made sense, and I just kind of lost my interest because of the faculty members that I was working with. I just wasn't drawn to them. And the university pushed people more towards the research side instead of the therapy side. So I think I just didn't do my research when I decided to pick a university, essentially.
So you're thinking, I think I want to be a therapist, and then you go to undergrad and you start working with some of the professors, and they're pushing you towards research and away from counseling, and that turns you off to it, and then you move out to Seattle, and then you randomly get a job at Antioch. So then you're at Antioch, and it's pretty much dominated by the psychology school and the counseling schools. So, and you'd been working at Antioch for a couple years or something.
About a year and a half.
And then decided to enter the couple and family therapy program. Interesting. Yeah. And you worked pretty closely with our department, so you got to know us pretty well, and so it must have appealed to you at that point.
Yeah, I visited some classes before I joined the program, talked with faculty extensively about what I would want to do if I was to go into counseling and therapy, and I got a lot of support for wanting to work with immigrant families that are of Indian origin, and that's what I wanted to do. And they gave me a lot of support and told me that based on my conversations with them, I seemed like I would do a good job talking with individuals.
Just shoo him off. He's going to destroy you. Yeah, I'm worried about him. So what about you, Aaron? Why did you decide to become a therapist?
My story goes back a long time ago, 1842 to be exact. Now, coming out of high school, I actually was very interested in psychology, but then I saw how much time and effort went into it, and at that age I was like, bleh, screw all that noise. So I was kind of into computers and stuff like that, so I went to community college at first I actually had two majors. I went to for computer-aided graphics design because I'm kind of artistic. And then that was way too high stress and way too, just way too demanding. I was good at it, but it just wasn't my passion. And then I went into just a general IT degree. And that's when everything started getting outsourced and all that stuff. And so it was like extremely difficult to find a job, and especially in Indiana. And then fast forward, I was just kind of lost for a few years and not really knowing what direction my life was going to go into. Luckily, my parents suggested that I pursue some kind of, psychology degree. So
really, they suggested it.
Well, they always knew that I had a passion for it, early on. So, and at that point, I was kind of very, very low, and I was like, all right, one last-ditch effort. And then so I went for my undergrad in psychology and fell in love with it instantly, of course, and I knew, of course, I wanted to be a practicing therapist. Technically, I wanted to be a psychologist, so I went through the whole process of applying. Shouldn't be called a process so much as a nightmare of applying to PhD programs
Around the country?
Yeah. So at the time, I was playing World of Warcraft, and I had met a bunch of friends from the West Coast. Got pretty close with them. And one of my friends suggested that there was a school, she said there was a school one of her friends went to, and she said that she thinks that they have a doctoral program. So I looked into it and applied for it, got rejected, and then as plan B, looked at the CFT program. So
Okay.
so yeah.
Right.
So you're second fiddle.
Yeah. Well, I interviewed you, Aaron.
Yes, you did.
I received your file, and you were in Indiana at the time, and I didn't want to force you to fly out, so we spoke on the phone. And I found you to be a well-spoken, excellent candidate. And after 1/4 of you being my advisee and a student, I would say that we chose really well. I can't imagine why anyone would not want you in their program.
Thank you.
Well, why did you choose couple and family therapy?
I wanted to, even though I'm not at this point really interested in seeing families, I want to have the skill set. I want to be able to work with individuals, couples, and families.
Yeah.
So just broaden my horizon.
Yeah. Right. The idea is that in the master's universe of therapists, you have social workers, mental health counselors, marriage and family therapists, and marriage and family therapists tend to get a lot more education working with not only individuals but also couples and families, and so they have more of a broad competency. Why do you choose CFT?
Again, I wanted to work with couples primarily, married and unmarried, but I also was eventually dream career, I suppose, is working with family systems where the family is an Indian family. The parents are immigrants relocating from their homeland to America, and the children are primarily raised here, similar to how I was. And knowing the difficult dynamics that happen in that family system, I wanted to work on reaching out to the families, which is going to be the most difficult part because Indian families don't, crave therapy. So figuring out an outlet where they'd be comfortable with a therapist of their origin, and trying to help the children navigate that dynamic, but also helping the parents get comfortable with it.
So in your observation of the Indian American culture, not the American Indian culture, East Indian American culture, that the families might benefit from family therapy, but they often don't choose to go.
Yeah.
And so maybe by having a familiar face, you're thinking you might be able to help those people.
Yeah, and trying to get rid of the stigma around therapy within Indian culture. It's viewed as a crutch, something that will shame the family in a lot of ways. So people don't seek it out, because if it gets found out, then it'll make them look bad in their community. So figuring out a way to provide therapy, but maybe call it something else, or not use the terms that people will shy away from in the culture.
Huh. What word would they use?
No idea.
Yeah. It's funny that you mentioned you're wanting to become a therapist for basically you and your people, not you specifically, obviously, but the people that you are around. And for me, it was similar. I forgot about this until you mentioned that I'm a musician and have been in bands, throughout my adult life. And
Bread Knife Internet, ladies and gentlemen.
That's right. Thank you very much. And when I was in my 20s, I really was amazed at how being in a band was like being married to the rest of your bandmates, but you don't get to have sex to alleviate the tension. Oh, you could, like Fleetwood Mac, that kind of thing. But then you have breakups, and then that totally destroys everything. It's a very intense relationship being in bands. Have you seen that Metallica documentary where they enter therapy? Oh, I should do a podcast about it. There's a whole documentary about how Metallica goes to therapy.
Didn't they go with their lawyers or something like that? Or is that something totally
like
different?
Metallica, probably.
So I wanted to become a therapist for bands. I thought, man, I'm going to make a killing because every band has massive dysfunction, believe me. If someone knows what it's like and is in their world, I'm going to make a killing. I'm going to be, and plus, if one famous band hires you for the rest of their career, that's all you just need one client, right?
Just got to get in.
Like a lawyer could have one client, right? And I've yet to have a band knock on my door. And where do you advertise for that? Like, are there band trade magazines?
Posters at their concerts.
Yeah.
Feeling sad.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm really interested in your first quarter in graduate school. I'm really interested to hear what your experience is like and what your experience was like in my class. So, and for the record, I'm 100% open to negative feedback. I'm really purely just interested in what it's like.
He's a jerk. Run for your lives.
Yeah, to be you along those lines. So, what was your first quarter like, and what was it like in Family of Origin?
I thought it was amazing. It was extremely transformative. It was humbling, humanizing, stressful. I remember one exercise we had where I think it was something to do with finding out where love comes from in your family. And I was in my apartment. My apartment has a Wi-Fi lounge. And I was there at 1 o'clock in the morning, crying my eyes out, filling out this exercise. And I'm like, I just know at any moment there's going to be just a ton of people walk by at 1 o'clock in the morning for some reason and just point and laugh. But it was ridiculous. And it's just the class itself is weird. What other class are you put in with a bunch of strangers, and before you've memorized their names, say, oh, by the way, here's all my deepest, darkest secrets. I guess prepare to be vulnerable. But it's totally it's an amazing, safe environment to be in. And that very much facilitates being vulnerable.
Yeah, I should explain a little bit of background. I think you say it beautifully from your experience, that in the first quarter at Antioch in the master's program, all the mental health counselors and the marriage and family therapists, they all take a class called Family of Origin Systems that was designed by Paul David, who is chair of the CFT program and has been on this podcast. He designed the class years ago, and it's a class that is designed to teach students about family of origin theories, but also to apply it to yourself with the expectation or the hope that you will discover things about yourself, because as a therapist, we're supposed to know about ourselves and know what our vulnerabilities are, because when we're working with clients, those things will be touched upon and will be a part of the therapeutic relationship with our clients. And so it's very experiential. And it's basically the entire quarter is basically designed to get you to analyze yourself every single week, and there's assignments every week that focus on that, and the papers are designed around that. But it's all theory based, and you're supposed to be learning about theory along the way, which you definitely do. And so one of the assignments that I designed is centered on how closeness and love is communicated in the family, because so often we talk about the negative sides of our family of origin, how dysfunction played out. And I thought that it's equally important to talk about how love is communicated. However, if there's a lot of sadness connected to the recollection of love and closeness in our childhood, that might also be another assignment that might not feel so great.
Right.
Yeah. And I really appreciate and commend you, Aaron, for being vulnerable. Not only were you vulnerable in your assignments, but in class as well. It's interesting to be witness to it. First couple class meetings, everyone's totally freaked out and anxious, and no one knows what's happening. And by week 5, 6, I started to see everyone start to relax. And then by the end of the quarter, it's like we're all one big family.
Yeah, family, absolutely.
Yeah. What was your experience like in the first quarter?
Similar to a lot of what Aaron said. You definitely do feel very vulnerable within the classroom. I had never been to therapy before starting the program, and I started therapy the same time as I started the program, so it was actually Within the class, I was pretty reserved in terms of sharing things that were too deep. And then I would go to therapy a couple days later and then have an outpouring of what was discussed in class. So it definitely put me in a different state than I've ever been in. It helped to learn about the theories of family systems, and then know that I'm finally getting language to put around everything I've experienced in my life, which was pretty powerful. And unlike what some of the other classmates went through within the program, I didn't have a lot of things to draw back on because of how, not secretive, how reserved my family is, because we don't talk about a lot of issues that come up in our lives. It just kind of gets brushed under the table. So whereas some people were writing from a place of sadness, maybe, a lot of emotion from that side, I was writing from a place of anger often for not knowing all these things. So it led to a very different experience. But it leads me to wanting to explore more about my family and getting them to talk about issues that have come up and getting them to talk about their childhood. So it was a very revealing class in terms of my personal life and having to put thought around certain aspects.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I took the class 17 years ago from Paul David and went through all the things that you went through. Just to let you know, we've all paid our dues.
Yeah.
One thing I really enjoyed about the class is because of the topics you talk about with your classmates, you really become closer to your classmates and some of your friends in a very different way. So there are friends that I've had for a long time that don't know the things about my life that I've discussed with Aaron, for instance. And it creates a very different relationship and a very powerful relationship in a different manner. Not to say that those friendships weren't meaningful, because they certainly were, but it creates an entirely different form of relationship.
Right. You guys were consultants, is what we call them, where everyone pairs up in the class, and every week there are assignments that you fill out prior to the class and discuss it with each other in detail for 20 minutes or so, and you're telling a lot of detailed personal information to each other.
And I love the way you had us choose too. That was just so lovely.
What did I do? I forgot.
So it was like the week you described it. You were like, yeah, your consultant's going to be a possible friend for life, and you're going to be sharing all these vulnerable things about each other, and you're just blowing our minds. Like, wow, this is going to be freaking huge. So
huge decision.
Yeah, just this life changing, altering decision with another human being. And the next week we come in class, and I don't even think we've sat down yet. And he's like, all right, choose your consultant. And I can't remember who said, but you were like, someone spoke up. They go, you mean the person that we're supposed to, we may share our lives with and stuff, be friends forever? He goes, yeah, that one.
So then it's scrambling, trying to find someone all of a sudden.
So how'd you choose each other?
I was just saying, should we share the story?
We actually, we'll leave out names, but the two of us were sitting with one
Maybe we
person.
should apologize on that.
We were sitting with someone between us, and neither of us, I don't know if we didn't want to partner with them, but before that class, I already had picked out 3 people in class that I wanted to choose as consultants. I was like, these are people I have to figure out how I'm going to choose them. And we're sitting there, and Aaron is one spot away from me, and there's someone who will go nameless. Let's call him Bob.
We're sorry, Bob.
Or Bobette, if it's a woman.
We're sorry about that.
Sitting between us, and Kirk says, pick your partner, and I look past this individual towards Aaron.
At the exact same time, I look past this individual.
We're like, hey, you want to partner up? And just ignore the person.
I felt so bad. I felt like such a dick. And it was no reflection on this person.
No, they're great. I
mean,
throughout the rest of the class, I was like, oh, this person's really cool. They're interesting. I was like, oh, I kind of felt like a jerk for skipping over them entirely, looking through them at the next person.
The only way it could have been more rude was to put our hand on his face and just push him back. It was so bad.
Right. So how was your relationship over the quarter? What was it like?
I thought it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked, because coming from Indiana, it's a very homogeneous group, all white, all conservative. So Harry was kind of my link into a different culture. And it was it blew my mind, some of the stuff he said. I think we hit it off right at the get-go. But it was good also because I don't necessarily have quality relationships with men. And so to have another man to have this good relationship with, it reinforced my positive internalized representations.
Very good. You've learned well. What about you, Harry?
Yeah, I mean, it was the same thing. It was actually interesting that Aaron mentioned having a different relationship with another man, because I've been talking to my therapist about how most of the positive relationships in my life have been with women. I was raised primarily by a lot of women. My father was, working a lot of the time, so I didn't see him, and most of the people that were raising me were, my mom, her sisters, aunts, grandmothers. So I didn't really have a lot of positive relationships either. Not that they were mostly negative, but it was mostly lots of relationships with women. So that's what I've been accustomed to. And when we were choosing consultants, Aaron was on my list of one of the people, but the other two were women because that's what I was drawn to and that's what I was comfortable with. So it probably helped that I didn't end up partnering with a woman just so I could experience a different relationship with another guy. So it was enlightening in that same manner. And since we had talked informally, before that class while we were hanging out waiting for the class to begin, it was just another person that I already had a level of comfort with. So it helped. And then, like I said, in the last class that Kirk taught, we had to write why we appreciate our consultant. And one of the things I talked about was how I've shared things with Aaron that not even I've shared with my wife, which is pretty powerful. But then again, my wife doesn't ask me how was love represented in your childhood? Right. So it's a different thing, but it's still interesting that you share more with a person from this class than you may have with other people in your current life.
So you mentioned your therapist. I'm always curious what therapists think about their clients in my class, because I always wonder, are they upset that I'm pushing them too far, or are they happy that they're doing assignments that are so therapeutic? I don't know. Did your therapist say anything?
Well, my therapist also went to Antioch and graduated from the program, although I think 10 years ago.
As did mine.
So she went to the program when it was a combined program and it wasn't separated between couple and family therapy and mental health counseling. So she is actually excited that I'm going through the program, and when she was doing the program, she also went and saw a therapist at the same time, and she thought it was very beneficial in terms of understanding yourself in the context of what you are in this program. And she didn't think I was being pushed too hard. She actually tries to push me harder in our therapy sessions in terms of when there's an issue that I obviously have feelings about that I don't want to discuss. She is the type of therapist that kind of pushes me as far as she can without, breaking my psyche down or anything like that.
Damn pushy therapists.
But she likes using therapy techniques where I'm experiencing the emotions that I'm trying to deny, looking back and seeing how I felt in certain situations in my childhood. So she has been doing a great job, and she has helping with my food paper and the way of trying to put it into context and talk about certain things that I may not have wanted to. So she pushed me a lot to try to open up more within my written assignments, and I think I would have if I didn't have a therapist that also went through a similar experience. I mean, it was lucky that she went to Antioch, so she knew what the experience was like. But she was really pushing me to open up as much as I could in my papers and not try to be reserved, but really put myself out there.
Yeah. We should say that when we say FOO, that stands for FOO, or Family of Origin, which is the class that I teach. Was she one of my students?
No, she didn't know who you were.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she remembers Paul.
Do you want to tell her name? I might not include it.
Her name is Adrienne Robinson.
So Adrienne Robinson is an excellent therapist in Seattle. That's what you're saying.
She is, yeah. She's located up in Capitol Hill.
What about you and your therapist?
Very similar story. She was, my therapist does remember you. And it was funny that after you, because a couple times you came into the class and said that, we're the best class ever and all that stuff. So I went and told my therapist. She goes, well, that makes me feel great. Because I was in
Right. I was saying that you guys were one of the best classes I've ever taught, if not the best. And I don't know if I just think that every time, but
that's my theory. I'm like, that's what you say to all the classes.
I don't know, man. You guys seem like a really incredible group. Everyone did really well. I didn't have any problems with any. It might just be a matter of none of you were problems. Like you could have another class with 15 of you guys and one problem student,
right.
And I will remember that class for that one student. There was no one in your class that was a problem, and so maybe that's what it is. I don't know. But anyway, so your therapist.
Yeah, she's amazing, and I just love the fact that she can totally relate. She's been through it all, and Jennifer Kessler, everybody. Jennifer Kessler.
Okay.
She said you were a teaching assistant, I think, with Paul David when she went through it.
Really? Yeah. I was a teaching assistant for 1 year from 97, 98. So does that sound about right?
We didn't discuss dates.
Okay.
But yeah.
What was it like working with the 14 other students? What'd you learn?
I thought we had an amazing class.
Yeah.
Because I know other people that are in like the other programs, we kind of like within CFT and art therapy and all that stuff. And most are amazing. Others are less than amazing.
Students, you mean?
Yeah.
All right.
But we just seem to have a really good batch. Mm-hmm. And I've become very close with, a lot of them, except for those damn window people that no one ever talks to.
Yeah, I'll say, so we were in a classroom that had a bank of windows on one side, and I would sometimes split the class into two groups for various reasons. And so randomly I just said team window and team wall. And it seemed to actually kind of produce a loyalty and an anti-other
Well, no.
situation.
Well, I'm not against the other at all.
It was also, I think, the personalities that just happened to sit in the right spots. People that were towards the wall did a lot more speaking in class.
Yeah, it's almost like
sharing.
the quiet people sat at the window. That's
there were, similar to what Aaron said, I have developed close relationships with a lot of the classmates, especially the ones that worked together on our papers and like study groups. But there are some great stories from the limited sharing on the other side of the room that it would have been great to get to know them better. But
yeah, tell me about it. I mean, I read the papers and the assignments, and everyone was just all in the same boat.
Yeah,
amazingly. And yeah, you might not ever hear one person talk, but to take it from me, they're doing a lot. They're doing the same work you guys are doing.
Yeah.
It might not seem like they are. And just for the record, one of the things that I will often say, and I know I said it with you guys, is that I'm the sort of professor that doesn't require people to talk in class. And a lot of professors will do this. They'll say, like, that person was too quiet. Well, I'm a quiet person in class. And people might be surprised by that. But if I'm in a group of people, like 10, 20 people, I just feel like I'd rather just keep it to myself, or I feel like if I open my mouth, it's likely to come out wrong, and or someone else is saying what I am thinking, and I think, well, they just said it, so why should I? I don't know.
I, on the other hand, am the loudmouth of the class.
You're yeah, that's funny. By the end of the quarter. So anyway, getting back to my point was that I will say to people, you don't have to talk. And so I think some shy people just say, great, so I'm never going to talk, and I'm totally cool with that. But anyway, getting back to you, Aaron, I noticed by the end of the quarter, correct me if I'm wrong, that you were like, oh, maybe I shouldn't be the first person to raise my hand.
No, I totally, like, for most of the quarter, because I'm always raising my hand, and I do it not only because I have something I think interesting to say, but to maybe, like, grease the wheels and get people talking,
Yeah.
And so I'll raise my hand, like, tentatively, but, like, if someone else raised it at the same time, I'm like, oh, no, get them to talk.
Right.
But what is so funny is that a couple times, no one was, like, raising their hands at all, so I was just waiting. And then, like, no one raises their hands, and so Harry just elbows me. He goes, just like, I know you have something to say, right?
Yeah, and sometimes I'll just call on people just for fun, but usually if there are 4 or 5, 6 different talkative people, then I'm cool with that. And as long as the shy people are cool with being shy and the talkative people are cool with being talkative, then whatevs. I don't really care. I'll tell you, there's sometimes when it can be a problem, and Aaron, you're not an example of this, is when someone dominates.
Right.
See, you were thinking about how other people were feeling. You're thinking, well, if no one else is going to talk, I'll talk. But if someone else is going to talk, then by all means, I've talked enough. You say something,
Absolutely.
Please. Yeah, but there are some people that don't think that way. It's like, it's me, 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 me. It's all about me. And that can be disruptive. But that's pretty rare, I would say. That happens 1 in every 200 students or something like that. It's pretty rare that someone's like that.
But I would think that, like, for like future students who may be shy, that I think that they're, in a sense, kind of robbing themselves of a big part
of the experience.
Of the experience, yeah, by sharing and being vulnerable and all that stuff.
Well, what was it like to share with the group? By the end of the quarter,
Kirk made me cry.
Right. Well, it was this moment where things were pretty emotional the class, and there were a lot of tears, and I was crying incidentally. I don't know. Did you notice I was crying? I
saw a little bit of red in your eyes, but
yeah, when I tear up and I'm trying to not lose it, I know I'm tearing up, but I always wonder, do other people? So you're saying you didn't really notice, but I was. And
I couldn't see through all the tears in my eyes.
And if I went with it, I would have just been like, just sobbing. But there was this moment in class where I was asking if anyone else had anything to say.
And let's just set this story up because it's hilarious. So I was actually kind of like double primed for this because the day before in therapy, I kind of had a little bit of breakthrough and, experienced some emotions, cried and stuff, which is great. And so I was a little bit kind of like exposed and vulnerable going into it. And then we had another person in class go through an experiential exercise that was extremely powerful. There wasn't a dry eye in the house.
Yeah.
And that was the double prime.
Right. I'll just describe that a little bit while we're on the topic. Is I demonstrated what family sculpting was like with a student. And in the exercise, she gets people in the room to be members of her family. And she stands up in the middle of the room and she sculpts this family representation. She puts people in statue stances that represent that family member. So, for instance, her parents were on the couch and they were facing away from each other, and she was on the couch trying to link the two of them. I don't know if this is making sense to people on podcast tonight.
Sounds good.
But essentially it put her into this space of really experientially remembering what it was like emotionally to be a child, I think 7 years old, in her family, on that particular day, in that moment. That was a very traumatic moment for her. And we processed it for a long time, and she was incredibly brave, and she was doing a lot of really good work. And I thought, man, all the other students are really benefiting from this because you really get to see what this could do for somebody, So then that happened, and then
we were doing a mental empty chair exercise?
Yeah.
Where we were to visualize someone we kind of had unfinished business with.
Yeah.
And needed to say something to. And so I took it very seriously, and I was very surprised at how powerful it was. I was blown away, actually. Yeah. And I start crying. We had our eyes closed and was visualizing this empty chair scenario.
So I asked the students to close their eyes and imagine someone whoever they wanted to. They would imagine that person in a chair sitting right across from them, and then they could say whatever they want to. The student could say whatever they want to this imaginary person or this real person that they're imagining to be in the chair across from them. And I don't know what anyone is imagining.
Right.
I'm just walking everyone through this exercise.
So it was really powerful, and I was already crying before I had my eyes opened. And so the end of the exercise was you open your eyes and then write down kind of the conversation or things you wanted to say. And as soon as I opened my eyes, Kirk had a laser guided, his eyeballs were just like honed right in on me. And we both kind of smiled at each other. And I'm like, son of a bitch, he's going to go on me. So he goes around the room and he's being very nonchalant and, asking everyone to share what they had. And people shared, and it was great. And the whole time, like, I just have just this laser focus on Kirk's unconscious, and it's going, I'm totally going to call on Aaron. I'm totally going to call on Aaron. And then so everybody kind of, there was kind of a lull in people raising their hands, and Kirk just gives me this raised eyebrow look with half a smirk that I will never forget to the day I die. And he just kind of lifts his head, like, huh? You want to share? And I'm like, damn it, I knew you were going to call on me. So by then I had no defenses left, and I just went ballistic.
Yeah.
And kind of just was completely vulnerable, and apparently blew everyone's mind because afterwards, like, people were hugging me and holding my hand, and everyone was amazing. Wow. I was getting hugged on the street, and texts later at night, and texts in the morning, and messages, and just all kinds of stuff. So.
Wow. I didn't know that. It's really
Yeah. It was
really
awesome.
sweet.
It was amazing.
Huh.
I called Kirk a dick. It was awesome.
Yeah. Right. So I'm on my way out of class, and we're all kind of on this high from having this really moving experience for the past 2 hours or something. And I wanted to reach out to Aaron, and so I walked up to him and put my hand on his shoulder. And I don't know if I said anything. I just said, like...
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I just said it. And I turn around, and I'm walking out the door, and you're like, "You're a dick." and then some of the other students were like, and I knew what you meant.
Yeah,
You're a snarky person.
Right.
I knew exactly what you meant, and I know you, and we have a good relationship, so I knew what it meant. And so, but then afterwards, you texted me, and you're like, "By the way, when I said you're a dick,"
I meant it in a loving way.
That's exactly what I said, too.
Yeah. And which is something I would have done too. I would have been like, "Oh God, I hope he didn't take that wrong. I'll text him." So yeah, it was quite a moving moment. What was your experience of that night?
It was pretty intense.
As a preface to that, like, I totally, like, as soon as I broke down, I instantly see Harry tighten up. He just does want to just to stiff back, and I'm like, I just freaked Harry out.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about in our very first class is if someone displays extreme emotion that I am not prepared for, it, like, puts me into this defensive state.
And he was at ground zero.
And I was sitting right next to Aaron after he was, blubbering all over everyone. So I was, like, when the class was over, I had to just get up and leave. Like, I was...
Oh, really?
Yeah, I literally got up, didn't say a word to anyone, I just left.
Oh, interesting. So was it distressing for you?
It was in a couple different ways. So when the student was going through the exercise that Kirk demonstrated, I was really into it. It was very emotional, but I didn't feel moved to emotion. So, there wasn't any, like, watery eyes. I didn't feel like how everyone else in the class was feeling, essentially, visually. So it was great. I mean, I loved the exercise, and the empty chair exercise that I did, I chose my mom, and I did it, and it was emotional writing everything down, but I still wasn't moved to emotion. If I had spoken, I probably would have been the same as Aaron would have, or did. And then he started, and I didn't expect him to cry because
I'm a big man.
He's a huge guy, and he's, like, intimidating, but throughout all the sharing that we had done one-on-one in the class, he never got to a point where he seemed to be moved to emotion. So it kind of came out of nowhere that I wasn't expecting it. So it really surprised me. I was just like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with these feelings. Let me get out of here.
Yeah. Aaron's feelings were, I mean, there had been emotion, but I think your emotion in that moment was...
It was just raw, unmitigated,
Yeah, it was a whole other level of vulnerability.
Absolutely.
And of sadness, really.
Yeah.
And when we were doing the exercise, student A, because I don't know if we can say her name, but she was still very composed, even though there were tears and there was emotion. It was a very, like, held together emotion, whereas with Aaron, it was just, like, all out there.
Right. And it can be anxiety provoking. And as a professor, as a therapist, I've gotten very used to that, but I wasn't used to it in the beginning, for sure. In our culture, we're not used to people breaking down.
Yeah.
And when people do, we're not usually in control of it, or we're not usually so close to it. We see it from afar or something, or we just go there, or we go, it'll be okay, or stop it, So it's a very unusual situation, really.
Yeah.
But it's just as non-threatening as any other emotion I've come to learn. As a professor, it took me longer to get used to it, but it's the same thing. We just have to have trust that someone's having an emotional experience, and the primary thing that they're going to be negatively affected by is if we shame them.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And so all we have to do is not shame them, which is easy to do.
Yeah.
And everything will be okay. Like, we just have to not laugh at them, which is easy to do.
Yeah.
And we don't have to say the right thing. We don't have to do the right thing. There's very little to worry about, But that's, I'm guessing, what that distress was. It's like, oh crap, how do I respond to this? What am I supposed to do with it? Was that part of the anxiety?
It was part of it, but thinking about it, it's also kind of, I guess, an invisible loyalty to my father, where in Indian culture, men don't cry. So when, as a child, if I got to the point of crying, my dad would just either tell me to stop or he would just get up and leave. So when people around me are crying, it's either I need to make them stop, tell them to stop, or just remove myself from the situation. So instead of like confronting the emotion or dealing with it, and I brought it up to my therapist, who I met the next day for an appointment, that one of the things I had difficulty processing was everyone was moved to these emotions and I wasn't. So I was like, why is that not happening to me?
She call you a robot?
She hinted at it, but through talking with her, I was like, it could be a good thing that I'm not moved to emotion, because it allows me to keep composure in a different way with a client potentially, where I'm not taking on their emotions and responding from that kind of state.
Yeah, well, my own path with crying was that I cried normally as a child in grade school, and then I remember just figuring out around age 10 that boys don't cry,
right.
Men don't cry. And I'll never forget, there was we were playing baseball, and in recess, like with the girls and the boys and everything, this guy goes up to bat and I'm next in line to go up to bat. And he wasn't a baseball player, and I'm just watching him, and he's trying his best, and he gets a hit, and he's so excited that he throws the bat. He just, there's a way of just dropping the bat, or just kind of chucking it to the side and running, but he throws it, okay, and runs to first base. It's like slow motion going in the air in this this revolving bat flying at me, and it hits me right in the knees.
Oh man.
And I don't think it hurt because my adrenaline or something. It was just the fear of it, and I just started bawling. And I'm in I remember fifth grade, probably like a May or June afternoon, and I'm crying, and all the girls come running up to me, and they're like, "Oh, are you okay?" And I go off onto the grassy knoll, and I'm kind of trying to calm down, and I'm crying, and all I can think about is, boys don't cry. What am I doing? I'm crying in front of everyone. What is wrong with me? And so after that point, I decided whenever I thought about crying, I would get angry. I remember this. I remember going, "Urgh!" I remember actually clenching my fists and making this angry face, and the tears wouldn't happen. They would. And so from the age of 12 until 25, I probably cried maybe twice, barely. Yeah. And then it took and then as I became a therapist and going into therapy myself, I started figuring out I have to learn how to cry again.
Yeah.
And so as the urge to cry would come on, I wouldn't get angry, and I would encourage it to happen. And then now I'm a crying mess. Just in us talking about Aaron crying, I started crying a little bit. And so I cry in movies, at weddings, in therapy, with my clients, with my students, commercials. A good AT&T commercial will make me cry. There was this, YouTube videos about cats. Anyway. So now it's the floodgates are open, and I'm crying all the time.
And I think it really speaks to the little mini culture that's created in family of origin class that for me personally, that I felt comfortable enough to share that level of emotion with everybody around me and not feel like I would be judged at all. I mean, that's huge, especially because there is that social construction that guys don't cry. You got to be a man. You got to be this. Got to be that. Got to impress the ladies and all that stuff.
Tell me about that. I'm curious from your side of things what it felt like in terms of safety, because obviously you didn't feel safe in the beginning.
Just building the relationships. We've had numerous study groups, foo groups as we call them, and just hanging out. Studying plus wine equals friendship. As it turns out, therapist types are raging alcoholics, so be prepared for that.
And reading each other's papers, knowing that there was a comfort in, here's my life, read about it, I'm not holding back, again, helped create that relationship and that level of comfort where it was this person is reading my family of origin story and I'm reading theirs, and they're not going to judge me and I'm not going to judge them. So it created this very respectful relationship.
Absolutely.
So you guys independently started a study group?
Yeah, Alicia sent out the first email saying, I'm going to host a study group. Like 5 of us went.
Yeah.
And then Aaron did another one for the second paper where like seven or 8 of us went.
And then there was like just this stream of just, hey, let's get together and drink lots of wine. And
Like tonight, isn't there a party at your place, Harry?
There is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm bringing wine. So.
I'm curious, Harry, how was it like for you in terms of safety?
It was very difficult at the beginning because one of the things I talked about in my Family of Origin paper is my inability to trust other people. Initially, it was very difficult to open up, but again, speaking with my therapist, she encouraged me to take a chance. One of the things that helped also was within conversations with people that have come into our program from my admissions role who have transferred from other universities, one of the things they've talked about since coming to Antioch's either CFT or clinical mental health counseling programs is that the students that are in the courses look at everything from a much mature perspective, where they're not just there to get a grade, they're not there to goof off and make friends, that they're there to move themselves forward in their professional development and their personal development. So the fact that everyone else was taking everything so seriously, yet with a bit of a lighthearted aspect because of the gravity of the emotions that come tied to everything, it helped me just feel more comfortable and say, these are people here that are going to not judge me because we're all at a much mature
Well, yeah,
space.
we're all kind of on an equal plane,
Yeah, and
it's like,
even despite the variety of ages, I mean, one of the girls I think is like 22 or 23, just a couple of years moved from her undergrad, and someone else is much older. So that age range
Just call me
also
old.
that age range also helps make it a bit more comfortable, unique situation. So the fact that people weren't going to judge me, it made it a little bit more comfortable to share things until it got to the point where people were reading about my life and I just didn't care.
yeah, and I've seen a change in you. I think you've
that's
been
good.
more open.
When Aaron broke down and cried, one of the things that I had trouble with was figuring out how to let him know that it affected me, but in a good way.
Because we kind of walked out at the same time, and I just,
Yeah.
like, with baggy, swelled eyes, I go, well, that was brutal.
And it just saw me bolt out the door.
yeah, and the class, because it was at the very, like, end of the class, so the class just kind of ended.
Yeah.
Yeah, which, by the way, I think that's one thing you should change for next time. Okay. Because it was like all this emotion that everyone had, and then Kirk's like, all right, guys, see you next week. I don't know what can be done to, like, diffuse the...
We need, like,
weight of
5 minutes of
everything.
closure, or just hugs or something.
Okay. Duly noted.
But it was funny.
Anything else along those lines that you want things to be different?
So it's good to have that one constant consultant.
Yeah.
But it also was really interesting and empowering at the study groups when we got to talk to other people about their lives. Mm-hmm. So if there's a forum to not switch consultants permanently, but to switch around or have groups of 3 people instead of 2.
Interesting.
Just more exercises or something like that. Yeah.
Because talking with Aaron, we were able to go back and forth about making sure we understood the concepts that we're learning about when we were talking about our lives. But there were still things I was unsure about. So talking with other people helped kind of reinforce that I was on the right track to learning everything, and it added more of an experience to the class and to the family feel of the class because we got to experience these relationships with other people that were also very deep.
And I think along those lines, just reaching out, like, for future students, just reaching out to, like, those fellow students and getting in a study group and having a drink and all that stuff. It's so rewarding, so rewarding.
And it was great because we got valuable feedback on our papers, but then we also just talked informally about
Except for the last paper.
For the record, I have corrected Harry's last paper, but not Aaron's.
I keep telling everybody that you've lined the bottom of your cat's litter box with mine.
It absorbs well.
Oh, thank you.
And it has a deodorant sort of quality to it. Well, I'm curious about what it was like in class for you. Any other experiences you want to talk about?
I think for me, like, this first quarter in general, but specifically this class, shattered a lot of, what's the word, preconceptions? Yeah. That I had going into just graduate school in general. I had it in my mind, I think it was because I was applying to PhD programs, that it's going to be just cutthroat, very competitive, that everybody was going to be smarter than me. Yeah, just a very negative environment, I guess. Mm. And it could not be farther from the truth. It's not competitive whatsoever. In fact, it's the opposite. It's supportive. Everybody supports each other.
Right. One of the things that I talk about a couple times that I did talk, with you guys about was that you're not in competition with each other. I really wanted to stress that, and that we're all in this together. And I'm a colleague as well as you're a professor. You're becoming a therapist, and we're going to be working together. We're all in the field together. And we're all here to make a difference in the world, to make it a better place. Why would we compete in that? Say somebody is not as good a therapist as someone else. Well, so what? They're still doing good in the world. They're still wanting to make the world a better place. Why would we want to point out that they're lesser?
Yeah, exactly.
The model of the program, the couple and family therapy program, as well as the other programs at Antioch, is that it's competency based. So if everyone gets competent, then everyone is labeled competent. It's not based on grades or based on performance. It's based on getting you to that level of competence, which makes more sense than just getting a grade.
Although, there are no grades, but I've never read so much into a check mark or the word good in my entire life. Harry and I would just have this little competition. Both of us would get good, and he's like, well, mine's written bigger, so it's obvious that. Or one of us would get excellent or something like that.
On one of my papers, I had excellent, and both Aaron and Byron were next to me, why is yours excellent? I was like, I'm just better than you guys, I guess.
And then one time I got super fabulous, ultra cool, and Harry didn't get anything because I think he just forgot to read his paper or something like that.
I did.
And Harry was like, maybe it was just so awesome that words couldn't describe how amazing it was.
Yeah, that was one week where you were the only person I forgot to read the assignment, and I just handed it back to you, and you were like, "How come there's nothing there?" And I was like, "Oh man!"
And of course, I was like, "Because he hates you."
Right. So even though.
Right. So maybe you need a smiley face stamp or something that's exactly the same all the time. And nobody can read it.
Well, that's what I was saying. I told you guys, I tried to make everyone's check the same. I think I told you guys that with one person in my check mark to basically say good job, I accidentally just drew a line. It was a straight line, and I was like, oh crap,
it's a big minus.
Yeah, that's a big minus. And so now I have to add that little check bit, but it's not going to look quite right. And is the student going to feel bad about themselves? What am I going to do?
It's so ridiculous.
Right. I mean, we can't get out of that model, that construction that somehow we're trying to perform. We're trying to achieve the A, because you probably all came from school backgrounds where you did really well, and you were known for getting good grades. And so we bring all that legacy into graduate school for therapy, and it takes a while to sort of shed that. And I really try to emphasize that say someone did perform not so great in class, that doesn't mean that they're not going to be a good therapist. It doesn't mean that they're not going to do good in the world. It just meant they didn't do that great in my class, and I wasn't very impressed with their academic work. Might I be very impressed with their clinical work? Absolutely. So, in schools we have to do something to evaluate your academic performance, but it's not necessarily correlated with your abilities as a therapist. For instance, there are some people in the class that I thought were doing tremendous work and learning quite a bit, but when it came time to actually write a paper about it, they weren't as adept as other people were. They weren't as competent writers as other people were. And so I have to evaluate those papers and give them feedback along those lines. But does that make them not as good of a therapist potentially? No, absolutely not. So I say that all the time in class, but I feel like I'm only halfway getting through to people to some extent,
Yeah.
Because there's still anxiety, I'm guessing, on your part of oh God, I wonder. I wonder what Kirk's going to think of me saying.
And that's another just the anxiety, just the insecurity that everybody feels just being in grad school is huge.
Yeah.
And I like that you've addressed that multiple times. It doesn't help at all, but but just know, for future students, just know that you're going to feel insecure, and that's okay, and that you're going to be in a supportive environment.
Yeah,
that's my PSA.
Well, what other advice do you have for future students coming to Antioch?
Study groups, lots of wine. Just know yourself as far as how far you can push yourself. We were talking about self-care and all that stuff. It's really important. Get a therapist. Let it all out. Get your 8 hours.
Your 8 hours?
8 hours of sleep.
As you have said, our job is going to be sitting down in a chair for 8+ hours a day, just listening to people. So, and if we're yawning and taking naps, it's not going to really help much.
Right. When you're a Microsoftie and you're yawning in front of your spreadsheets, it's not a big deal.
It doesn't matter. No.
But when you're a therapist and you're tired, it's disastrous. Not only is it just very difficult to deal with as a therapist, but the client knows. You're there to talk, and you don't want your therapist going,
I'm sorry, am I boring you?
So your advice is study groups, get your 8 hours, self-care, notice your insecurity, but don't beat yourself up about it. Don't try to take it seriously. What do you say here?
My advice would be to go out on a limb. I mean, like so many people in the class already did in terms of sharing things that they wouldn't share. Going out on a limb and fostering relationships with your peers in the classroom. Like you mentioned at the beginning of the class, these are people that potentially will be our peers in the field once we all leave the program and become therapists. So it's good to have those relationships started early so you kind of grow together and help support each other through the program. The support in our class was huge, and I think it's important that you take the step yourself to support other people within the class. There are specific moments when reading each other's papers, there were clearly people that had papers that weren't as well written as others. And instead of reading it and just saying, oh, it's great, and not caring about it and worrying about yourself, Aaron specifically made an effort saying, like, you guys, we need to help this person with this paper because it's not to the level it needs to be. So, that may not happen in other fields or in other universities where you want to make sure that your paper is good, but not the other person's.
Yeah, it's that competition.
Yeah. And that specifically spoke to an instance where I was walking around campus and I talked to another student from another food class who had mentioned that someone had dropped out of their class the day one of their papers was due because she just didn't feel like her paper was good. And he didn't make anything of it, and I really encouraged him. I was like, you need to, and she happened to be his consultant too, and he wasn't like really moved by it. So I was like, you need to call her and get in touch with her and tell her to, either come back to class or figure out what's wrong and support her in that way. And we talked about it for a while, and then I saw him about a week later, and I was like, did you talk to her? And what's going on? He was like, yeah, I talked to her, and she was going through some other personal issues that caused her to kind of lose sight of the paper. And he talked to her, and luckily she was able to withdraw from the class without having too much of a financial hit and not getting incomplete. And she's back enrolled in it again the next quarter. So she's going to be coming back. So it was like, it's good that she was supported, but what if, he hadn't said anything? That could have just been someone who left the program and didn't come back to it. But that this person felt supported because someone reached out to him. I think that's important within any environment, but specifically within grad school where the weight of the work you're doing is so intense, especially within this program. That you need that support, and someone needs to step out on a limb and offer that hand of support.
So are you saying that you can't imagine a student in our class having that experience?
Oh yeah, I can't imagine someone in our class being driven to the point of potentially dropping out of the program without someone else in the class, even their consultant, like supporting them, telling them to get back into or doing extra things to help them stay on top of their game. Because that's
our class would be the consultant and about 4 other people rushing to support.
Yeah, well, that's what makes you guys the above average course or group of students that I observed you guys to be.
Kiss ass.
Yeah.
And I mean, because of the stuff we've talked about in this class, and because of the weight of our words in the class, I can easily see myself, not relying, but staying in touch with the peers from the class as I move through the program, even though I'm not in the same classes as them. So it's a great network to just expand. As you get closer with people in other classes, you continue to have your family from your family of origin class.
All right. Well, anything else you'd like to say about family of origin or Antioch or becoming a therapist, or what are your hopes for the future? I don't know.
I think the program's been really, really great so far. I mean, it's only my first class, but it's been really exciting getting back into it, having been out of it for so long. The best part is there's assurance that this is what I want to do, just from the first class, experiencing what it was like to, again, put terminology around my life. And it makes me want to reach out to family members and talk to them about their lives so I can see how this cycle has continued through to me, and making sure the cycle doesn't continue on afterwards. The community has been really supportive. I love that there isn't the emphasis on putting a grade, which helps keep the competition down. It's been good to get the feedback. The thing with the feedback is, leading up to the large papers, the feedback was just checks. So even there's still this anxiety around, what is the feedback going to be on this paper where we get the feedback? But it's been great. I mean, I feel like I've improved my writing, even though my punctuation still sucks, but I have Aaron here to fix that. But yeah, I mean, it's a great program for students that are coming in. It's going to be challenging personally. Having never gone through therapy, it's been a different experience for me than I'm sure people that have gone through therapy and will continue to do so. So it's kind of like this whole new chapter of my life, not only just academically and professionally, but also personally. It's a huge personal endeavor to continue through it. But yeah, the program's been more than what I expected.
That's interesting because if anyone would have known what it would have been like,
it would be me, right?
It'd be you because you work for Antioch and you're the admissions person, and all the people who apply to our program apply through you, and you're one of the first people that describes the program to them.
Yeah, and I describe it based on conversations with faculty and other students that I've had. So I'm like, oh, great. I'm glad that the description I've had of the program has been accurate to what I'm experiencing and not just made up stuff about what it could be. So.
False advertising. Yeah.
During the application process, I called him Dr. Chima.
Yeah?
I didn't correct him.
So it's interesting. So you worked with Harry to apply, and then I interviewed you.
Yeah. Most of the students in the class I met with face-to-face during the application process. So it was really cool seeing them in the program. I mean, it's been great going around the university and seeing other students that I've recruited in the past, and then getting reaffirmation from them that the program is great and it's what they wanted, and they're really changed by the program. Paul David, the chair of the program, has said to me that from day one to when you graduate, you're a completely different person.
Absolutely.
And even from day one to the end of this class, I feel like I'm a completely different person. So
absolutely.
It's great validation that you're getting what was sold to you, essentially, and more.
Is that weird to be the admissions person with the classmates?
Yeah, it was weird because I didn't know how much I should share because I'm still like a staff member at the university.
Yeah.
But then again, I don't really work with students once they get into the program, so it's different.
Right.
And there's been no bickering about stuff that's going on within the classroom or how you've taught the class or other things. So I haven't been in like a weird situation where I have to like watch my math because there's nothing to be watched about it. So
right.
Even in those informal study groups, it wasn't like, so tell us the secrets of what the professors are really like, or anything like that.
Yeah. I never even thought of that.
Right, because you know a lot about us behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And could, illuminate. And I would actually encourage you to illuminate because it might break down that hierarchy that is not helpful.
Yeah. And I guess a last thing would be, speaking with some other friends that I have that have done other programs that are not Antioch, the difference in hearing Antioch students talk about the relationship with their faculty members versus unnamed student and other unnamed university faculty members, and how our faculty members are just a lot more supportive. They're really taking a genuine interest in your individual development and your individual interests, I guess, because of the style of the academics where you read in every individual paper and give feedback instead of just reading it and saying, A, B, C. Our faculty are our resources. And I've been told that I need to use faculty more because I've only met with my advisor once for 15 minutes.
Yeah, definitely use your advisors. I think the reason why it feels differently to the students than it might feel in other schools, other universities, is that the faculty ourselves are like a family. We feel close to each other because like I was saying before, the professors have been teaching here forever. I've been teaching for 15, 16 years at Antioch, and I'm one of the new guys.
Right.
And so I think that really is felt by the students because when you as a professor feel good about your job and feel supported and know that your fellow faculty have your back and you love going to work, I think it comes out in your work with students. So I think that's part of it too.
Yeah, just building off of like the overall experience. Just how life-altering just this one class is, and this is at the very beginning of the entire program. And like Harry said, I'm a completely different person now than what I was 3 months ago, and a better person, and a better human being. And not only that, like I love people more. I think sometimes I'm totally guilty of this. We just walk around in our own heads. And we don't really, we kind of see people as just kind of these, not so much humans, just other things in our periphery.
That's an old guy, and that's a yuppie, or that's a homeless person.
That's not a person with their own thoughts, feelings, problems,
right.
Issue, battles, all that stuff. And it just, but and having that awareness brings me closer to my fellow humans.
I feel the same way.
Yeah, it totally does.
Yeah, I mean,
and
if
it's very
one
humbling.
If it's one thing about reading your papers and being a therapist and seeing the yuppie and the old guy and the homeless person come into your office and talk about themselves, you realize that all of our ideas about who people are often false.
Yeah.
And that once you get to know people, you realize that everyone has a very rich, interesting story that I can relate to.
Absolutely.
That I can really go, whoa, I am riveted by your life. So someone that is walking down the street and you just sort of label offhandedly, once you actually get to know them, in all likelihood, they'd blow you away.
Yeah.
You know? And so that's what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a greater sense of awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. That doesn't go away. Yeah, I think there was some famous foreign guy who said this, that once your awareness is expanded, it never shrinks. It never goes back. Yeah, so to future students, be prepared to have your life changed for the better.
You seem, I don't know if this is just a reflection of my relationship with you developing or just
our bromance,
but you seem much more comfortable in your own shoes than when I first met you.
Really?
Yeah. You seem more at peace or something.
Yeah.
More at peace.
More peace.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Just everything has expanded, especially, I mean, everybody in podcast land and even you guys don't even know how the situation that I came from, but it was entirely different than this experience. And it's been extremely healthy for me, particularly, this class. And so I very much feel like a different human being, a better human being. And I think that's probably like the general consensus from all of us is that, we're walking around like hugging and loving and all kinds of stuff.
It's funny that one of the last assignments you had us do this past week, talking about how we've used this, how did you display differentiation or lack of or whatever. One of them was...
Neither of us did like half of it. Apparently we're perfect human beings.
One of them was, when did you judge someone and then like stop yourself and whatever.
And show compassion.
Yeah. My answer was just...
Yeah, Harry.
I judged a lot of people.
Period.
But then it was like... But I was aware of what I was doing and I was able to stop myself from continuing, which was very different than in the past where it was just like judge. So.
Yeah. And I think that's like a huge point to build off that is that coming into grad school and into this class, I had this expectation that I had to be more than human, because everybody else is going to be. They're going to be these super machines that are just going to shoot lasers and thoughts out of their faces. And it's totally not like that whatsoever.
Yeah.
And just breaking down all of our social constructions, not to get postmodern on everybody, but just leave all that stuff at the door.
Yeah.
That was a funny thing that you said too in your nonchalant way. Like, yeah, all those preconceived notions and stuff that you've been walking around with whole life. Yeah, go ahead and get rid of those. Just do that. Just do that real quick for me.
Yeah, I think I said to you guys, that was you before you were a therapist.
Right, yeah.
Now that you're a therapist, you can't think that way anymore.
Just leave it at the door.
Yeah. That's over.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you totally can't.
Right.
And just looking back on just ways that I used to think and stuff, and I just do a face palm,
Yeah.
Because you can't be that way anymore.
And it's only the first step. We're level 1 right now. We had a long way to go.
I know.
I'm a level 1 therapist. I cast magic missile and differentiation.
I cast magic missile at the depression. All right. Well, on that note, thank you guys, Harry and Aaron, so much for coming on the podcast and talking about your experience. It's been very interesting to me. I'd love to talk about it more with you, and I'm sure we will, but we've been talking for almost 2 hours, and
oh, wow.
That's just too long. Yeah.
That's just too long.
That does it for another episode of Psychology in Seattle. Thanks for joining us, and please take care of yourself and take care of other people. Stop judging and have more compassion. Harry.
Thank you.
Aquarius. Larry.